So how was emotion memory introduced to me in class? Well, not necessarily to me, but to the whole class. And I will start out by saying that I worked and studied under a teacher who was a member of the Actors Studio, who worked closely with Lee Strasberg, so he knew intimate, and who had been teaching for over 50 years, and was a professional, working till the day he died. So emotion memory is not something that you should approach lightly. Emotion memory is not something that Lee Strasberg invented. Emotion memory is covered by Konstantin Stanislavski, and an actor prepares. I believe it's also covered in the first 6 lessons by Boleslavsky. And there are many other books that cover this topic. Bobby Lewis also talks about emotional memory. He has his own books. And however you want to feel about emotion memory, or you have ideas, for whatever reason, the method, when it's talked about, a method actor or what have you, the Lee Strasberg comes into mind, emotion memory comes into mind. However, the Actors Studio is a result of the group theater. And there are books out there. Maybe one day I will cover that. But the group theater, members of the group theater eventually ended up teaching their own methods, if you like, a variation on, again, the American way of acting that was brought in by disciples of Konstantin Stanislavski. And the group theater included members such as Stella Adler, Sanford Meisner, Herbert Berghoff, let me think, who else? Stella Adler, Bobby Lewis was also part of that. Many of the exponents of one of the systems that you may be learning in the US and in America is a result of the group theater. If you study the history, the odds of them not being somehow associated with either the group theater, and when the group theater, when that ended, eventually they tried to come back together, and the Actors Studio was born. The Actors Studio, if I'm not mistaken, was Elia Kazan, I think it was Cheryl Crawford, and maybe Bobby Lewis. I'm doing this off the top of my head here. I'd have to look at that. But there is a book out about the Actors Studio specifically. There are several where there are recordings, if you can get a hold of them, of actual sessions at the Actors Studio. I know that there was a legal battle over this because these were supposed to remain private. But I'm not sure. But I know that there is a book with transcripts of the sessions occurring under Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio. So if this is something that interests you, you should definitely look into it. I myself, I didn't start that way. I basically fell into acting by accident, purely at the university. At that time, it was not a university, but it was a college, a state college. And at the time, I wanted to take some classes, and what I was interested in doing was just taking classes, the requisite classes that are pretty much standard, like math, probably English and all that, for your major, while I was trying to figure out what school I was going to go to. So I decided to sign up because there was an open invitation. Like I said, it was a state college, more local in the city that I was in at that time. And so I got an invitation, a letter. Probably they were just doing mass mailings, and I decided to go on the day that they were basically looking at your high school grades, just to get an overall picture if they could accept you or not. And they just basically said, yeah, you can take classes here. And at the time, because of where we were in terms of registration, a lot of the classes was full, and so I ended up seeing an acting class, and I asked the advisor at the time if I could take it as an elective, and he or she said yes. I can't remember. And I was always curious, and I ended up taking it. And what ended up as an elective ended up being a course that I ended up taking for almost 2 years. And during that period, I was asking my teacher a lot, because I had decided to find out about acting. At the time, I was thinking about it professionally. I was just thinking it as again, as a fun thing to do, as a thing that maybe could help me in public speaking, what have you. And so I did research on my own and started to read a little bit about acting, asking questions in my neighborhood. And somehow Stanislavski kept coming up, and I'm like, well, who is this Stanislavski? And that led me to hear about Stella Adler, Lee Strasberg, and all the different acting teachers teaching their methods, which eventually led me to think about maybe I should think of doing this professionally, not at the college level, but to actually go to an actual conservatory or a school that was exclusively teaching professional actors, to see if that was something that I was good at or could, swim among the top people. And so that's how I had started to read, and I would go to bookstores and go to the acting session and see what books were out about acting, and read. Go to my local library, see what they had about acting. And I started to read. Obviously at the college level, at the city college level, this is not in New York, at the city in my area, they introduced us obviously to famous playwrights, modern playwrights, such as Eugene O'Neill, Tennessee Williams, Arthur Miller, and the list goes on. So I knew that these were the playwrights that a lot of, in time I discovered that a lot of the actor, studio, group theater, Clifford Odets, these actors, the actors from the actor studio, the group theater, what have you, they were working with those plays, with that material. So going back to the emotion memory and the method, the actor studio is still active. So they're in New York City. They audition, I believe, I know for sure at least twice a year, maybe 4 times a year. I don't know if they're still doing it. You would go to their website. They have an official website. There's only one actor studio, and that's in New York, and they have another one in another branch in LA. That's it. There are no other actor studio. And again, as I said, the teacher that I worked under, and what I decided to do at the time was to audit. And by auditing, I would sign up for that just one day, not for the class, but just to audit, sit in the class, and watch their method of teaching. And I knew that at that time, by the time I had gotten to the point where I decided to go to a professional school to see if it was something that I wanted to pursue seriously, and to be competitive, because this, it's one thing to be taking a class at a city university that's more geared just to fulfill an elective, maybe to introduce you to it, but the goal is not to make you a professional actor. That was my situation. I know that schools have changed since, and there are schools that will push you in that direction, but at that time it was more, as I said, an elective. So I said I have to go to New York, and I went to New York because New York was the closest to me. If I was closer to LA, I guess I would have found a way to find what teachers were teaching to be a professional actor. But in New York, it's very easy because you have so many schools that professional actors go to that you cannot go wrong. So if you are thinking of going you're thinking of studying seriously acting, maybe you don't want to go the university route, then and you can somehow come to New York and somehow survive, because it is very, very, very expensive in New York City. But if you can and you want to see if you have what it takes, not only you have the schools, but you have also the agencies, if to get representation, the managers, you have the casting directors. I mean, there's a lot going on in New York, and you have a lot of TV. You still have film. A lot of people for film, they go to LA, but in New York, you can test it without, if you don't want to go to LA and you're closer to New York, you can test it. You can commute if you, for example, out of, either New Jersey, Connecticut. I think those are possible. Do a 2-hour commute, maybe take a lesson or two with a professional at a professional acting school. That is possible. And that way you can test the waters and see if that's something you could do. And know that you are getting the same training that actors that you look at in films have gotten. Especially the ones that have studied. Otherwise, a lot of actors too have either been doing it since they were children, so they learn on the job. But a lot of them, they still take classes. They either have a private coach or they, what have you. You'd be surprised. A lot of people continue to study. It's a lifelong thing that you always do because you always want to stay sharp. You always want to stay in shape. It's like going to the gym. If you stop going to the gym, you get a little rusty. But anyway, so if that's something you wanted to do, yes, New York is an option. There's schools everywhere. You just have to have the money to be able to do it and not have to worry about your bills. So back to the acting class for the emotion memory. The way, as I said to you, the teacher who was active at the actor studio, not somebody who was at the actor studio and maybe wasn't. No, this is somebody who was actively involved with the actor studio until his death. The way that is introduced at the very beginning is through the way, as a general rule, You learn to do relaxation. That's integral to we'll call it the actor studio way of teaching. The Lee Strasberg way of teaching is relaxation. Then you learn that. Then you move on to sense memory. And I haven't said emotion memory, which is very different. Sense memory. And you start with objects. You would take, for example, I have here in front of me a dollar bill. I would describe the dollar bill. You would do this in front of a class. You would describe the dollar bill. And what you're doing is you're trying to do the best you can what you're seeing. Okay, so the bill is green, light green. It has different letters. The letters are about, this size, the how it feels. You might even smell it. Sometimes it would be limited to maybe to just what you saw visually, but you can work all 5 senses. And then after that, you would get to bring. Now this is an object. You're asked to bring an object for the class, and you bring any object. But the next time you're asked to, once you accomplish that, is to bring an object that has meaning to you. And that is pushing you closer to emotion memory. But the object of the exercise is not to bring emotions, but to take the same object. Again, I may be wrong, but from what I recall, you would describe the object the same way you described the object that had no meaning for you that you brought in before. So you're doing the same thing, but this time it's with an object that has a strong meaning for you. And hopefully an emotion would come out of that. So, an example would be you bringing in, let's say, a necklace that has a very special meaning to you. Sorry about that. That has a very special meaning to you. That was given to you by somebody who, for whatever reason, is no longer part of your life. And it's a very dear necklace to you, that if you were to lose it would be irreplaceable. Something like that is what you want to bring. Okay? And the objective is not to talk about whatever, is to describe the object in detail. Same thing, the length of it, it's shiny, it's a yellowish tone, it's a gold. You just get into, it's a little rough, it feels like something else. You're describing it. Then you put in your hand and it weighs about so much. Then you go into the details of it. And that's now more, as I said, a very personal item. Now, when you get to the emotion memory exercise, you're told to prepare a monologue, usually a short monologue, maybe a 1 minute, 2 minute, very short monologue. And you memorize it straight, with no preconceived ideas of how you're going to say or not say. You just memorize it. Know it by heart. As I said, there is no you working on the character. You just memorize the piece very well. Very well. And once you have that, then now you're asked to think about an event in your life that has to be at least 7 years or more. And that was very important, that it had to be 7 years or more. It could not be recent. and it also could not be something that you would have a hard time dealing with. You know, because now we're getting into very, very delicate whatever. So if it was an emotion, if it was a situation, let's say for example, let's take an extreme example where somebody, it was so traumatic that you had a nervous breakdown. That's not what you want to bring. Obviously, that's not something you dealt with. The last thing you would want to do is bring up something like that up, where you would lose control and you would end up in the hospital. But you know, you may want to bring something that was important in your life, 7 years, but had meaning that you could technically have no problems talking about, and you know, what have you. So in that situation, and you know, most people think, oh, it has to be a crying. It could also be one where you're laughing hysterically, you know, in tears. But most people bring something where they had a breakdown. When I say breakdown, they broke down crying. So now, remember, by then you've practiced you're describing an object sensually, you know, through one of the senses, which is either seeing, hearing, touch, taste, feel. And one of the most famous one is the coffee cup, where it's hot. You work on that while it's hot. You would do this every day, 5 minutes every day. We start out with, you can go into it, people do these exercises. Again, this is all Strasberg. Again, you can look into Konstantin Stanislavski, the first, I think it's not the first 6 lessons. I can't think of the name now. It's not building a character. An Actor Prepares. He has several books. He eventually ended up going into abandoning this, but the group theater of Strasberg and the other members took this and went with it. And I briefly mentioned the Actor Studio, that it was formed by, as I said, Elia Kazan, Cheryl Crawford, and I think it was Bobby Lewis. And you go, well, the Actor Studio thought of Lee Strasberg. That is correct, but when you read the history, at a certain point, Elia Kazan was doing a lot of films. Cheryl Crawford was producing and what have you. Robert Lewis probably was also directing and what have you. He had his students. At a certain point, and I think Lee Strasberg was more involved with the Actors Studio in terms of a leadership role. I can't remember. Again, it's been a while since I've read the story, the history of this. But at any rate, Lee Strasberg started to take more and more, got more and more involved in the sessions, and that's why Lee Strasberg is thought of when you think of the Actors Studio, because he was the most controversial. Stella Adler, she departed from him. They broke off because she felt that the emphasis on emotion memory was detrimental to the actor. She was in Moscow, according to, if you read her story, and got a hold of Stanislavski. Stanislavski by then had abandoned emotion memory. When she came back, she says, no, we're going the wrong way. Lee Strasberg stayed his way, she went her way, and their hatred or rivalry, however you want to think of it, was to the very end. Stella Adler, her one student, she had many students, but her claim, and I guess Brando gives her also credit, was discovering Marlon Brando, helping him, and what have you. But and many people claimed Marlon Brando. Many teachers say, whatever. But the reality is that Marlon Brando was a genius, and he was going to blossom regardless of whomever came his way. But at any rate, so Lee Strasberg took a more prominent role at the Actors Studio. Marilyn Monroe was fascinated with the Actors Studio, so she kind of he took her and used her to give himself some more, bring the Actors Studio more prominence. She wanted to be part of it, and I think even in her will, she left a portion of her estate to the actor, or to Lee Strasberg, or the actors to Lee Strasberg. It's a fascinating story. But at any rate, the Actors Studio, when you read the story of the Actors Studio, just keep in mind that the method, or the Actors Studio, the Lee Strasberg, however you want to think of it, emotion memory, when you look at this book, it's called The Actors Studio. In this book, it literally basically says that 50% or more of all Academy Award winners or nominees have developed or have been influenced by the method. So, you can make that something for you to think about. But going back to the emotion memory is very controversial, and you should only do it if you're comfortable doing it. But you can do without it. And it was never something that you were supposed to use at all times. Even my teacher said that you only use it when you've exhausted every other technique. So going back to the exercise, I'm at minute here 27, okay? And you're saying to yourself, oh, this is kind of long. Let me say this to you. You cannot learn this overnight. You're going to spend many classes perfecting this and many years perfecting this. I personally do not use it. I've known of people who use it. I personally don't want to use it, but I am aware of it. And the trick with this is in the exercise. Your clue as to how to proceed is in the exercise when you bring your personal object. When you do the personal object that has a strong meaning to you, and same thing, I think the personal object is something, you want to bring it from 7 years. When you do the personal object, the object is not for you to cry or laugh, or you're not looking for the result. That's the mistake that everybody will make and has to work at not making. The objective is to simply describe what you either hear, see, smell, taste, the 5 senses. And if you do not have an emotional reaction to that, that's not a negative. Your objective is to clearly describe the details that you're seeing. The more details you have, the better it is. Now, you're using an actual physical object, but when you do the emotion memory, you have to do this mentally, without words. And so you cannot anticipate the emotion memory. And so when you're doing the emotion memory and you go back 7 years, at least 7 years, and ideally you work with somebody who can guide you. This is not something that you can do without guidance. You need somebody who has actually worked at the Lee Strasberg. That's the idea. You look at the resume, they're teaching you that. If you really want to learn, it has to be through that, and somebody who has been doing it for a while. And I mean, you have to be very, very selective. It's a very, very delicate thing. The details of this, again, as I mentioned, this all comes from Konstantin Stanislavski, the actor prepares. There are several books, as I mentioned earlier, that goes into it. But that's not going to help you as a beginner. You have to work with somebody, a prominent teacher who worked either directly with Lee Strasberg or any of his proponents, so that you can do this correctly, because you can get it all wrong and not benefit from it. At any rate, you find an emotion memory that you can handle, that you can talk about if you needed to talk about it. 7 years or older. That's how I was taught, not sooner. There are people who have been doing it for years and maybe they can break that rule. You're not that person. 7 years older and that you can handle, not something that is too delicate. That might be an emotional problem for you to get, that's going to open a wound that would probably require you to get therapy for probably years to come. So you don't want to do that. That's why it's important that you work with somebody who is trained under the Lee Strasberg method. Absent of any ideas as to how you would go about that, I would tell you, okay, you would have to find somebody in New York City, like the Lee Strasberg Institute, and look at their resume, see how long they've been teaching, and then judge it from that, and ideally audit and see if that teacher's personality will work with you. Because not all teachers are right for everybody. Some teachers are better for some students than others. So some people work better with men, some people work better with women. Only you know. Back to the 7 years. So what happens is, in the class, what you do is the teacher starts to ask you, what do you see? And here you're verbalizing, because you remember, you're a beginner, you haven't done this before. So the teacher has to know that you're not talking about emotion, but you're talking about actual things that you can visualize from that day. So the teacher would ask you, okay, do you remember the day? Was it morning? What time was it? Okay, what do you see? Where are you? You're in a room. What are the walls? What color are the walls? How tall are the walls? Is there? And then you say, I'm in the kitchen. Is there a table? Yes. What's on the table? Oh, can you describe it? Okay. There's something on the stove. Okay. What's on the stove? Can you describe it? Where are you in relation to that? And you're going step by step by step. All you're doing is describing detail to detail to detail what you see, hear, smell, and if you're eating, taste. You see? Not for 1 second are you thinking about that person that walked into the room and gave you bad news, for example. Absolutely not. And then let's say, for example, in this situation, then the phone rings. And the anticipation is for you to already know what that phone conversation is. And he's, no. So the phone rings. Okay. How many times did it ring? Okay. Where are you? Okay. So you walk towards it. Okay. How far away are you from the phone? Okay. Now, what happens? You pick it up. Okay. You pick it up with which hand? Okay. How does it feel? Okay. Good. What do you see? Where are you looking? What do you understand? And then, okay, so you hear a voice. Okay. What's the voice? How does it sound? Is it low? Is it high? Do you remember? Can you hear what the person told you? And then all of a sudden, you may get very, very emotional. And then at that moment, the teacher will say to you, now do the monologue. word for word. And what that emotion colors the monologue. And that's the exercise. It's much more involved than that, but I've given you a very short introduction to emotion memory. It's much more involved. Now there are other things you can do outside of emotion memory. That's personalization. There's substitution, and working off your partner, and having objectives, being able to improvise around your objectives. All these things can give you the result that you're looking for, that needed for the character. Check out my other videos if you're interested. I have other stuff going on. At any rate, thank you for listening. Hit the notification bell. That way you get notified when I upload a video. You'll check from my selections that I cover a variety of things. These are things that interest me. But hopefully you'll find something that interests you and can be of help to you. And if you have any questions or you have ideas for maybe something that I should maybe cover, please leave a comment. Thank you and have a nice day.